Welcome to Repertoire Wednesday with my dad, Dr. Joe Tranquilla.
Thanks, Everett. Today, we're going to take a look at Vision Chant, and I'm joined by the composer Andrew Balfour to discuss the music. Of Cree descent, Andrew is an innovative composer, conductor, singer, and sound designer with a large body of choral, instrumental, electroacoustic, and orchestral works. We've performed this piece in the Canadian Chamber Choir for many years, and we're delighted to have a chance to speak with Andrew about it today. I've chosen to talk about this piece today because June 21st is Canada's National Indigenous Peoples Day. What sets this piece apart, I think, is the remarkable sonic and spiritual journey it can take you on. The parts are individually robust and expressive, and at the same time completely interdependent. The opening, the altos lay down that foundation upon which the sopranos deliver their opening remarks, and the sopranos themselves are in sort of dialogue with one another, and then the basses enter and the collective tone shifts again. When working on this music, the conductor needs to keep in mind the pacing of the sections in this ABA form, as well as the transitions between the sections. Dynamic scheme, vocal stamina, and mental focus are all really important here. There's also a lot of divisi in the parts, so that will need to be carefully determined well in advance. Andrew, thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. Many of us in the Canadian Chamber Choir have had the opportunity to know your work and to hear you speak about your craft. The CCC has sung Vision Chant for many years, and we recorded it on our most recent album, Seasons of Life and Landscape. I wonder, can you just tell us about the piece and how it fits into the larger work that it's taken from?
Well, the entire work is called Bawajigewin, which is like Vision Quest. The official word in Cree is like in terms of the it was a 3-movement work that was commissioned by the Kingston Chamber Choir in 2014. And so I wrote this 3-movement choral suite, I guess you'd call it. And Vision Chant was the last movement of it. And I feel it's kind of like sometimes if you're, as a composer, you can write certain movements or pieces and some things stand out. And I really feel that Vision Chant has stood out. In some ways, I look at the chant that the sopranos, the soprano 1 and soprano 2, and like, hey, hey, it's almost like, you know, the altos with that drone, with the opening, you know, drone, it's almost like they have like a rocks and they're starting the fire. They crack it down, and then when the sopranos come in, it's almost like the fire is starting, especially with ceremonial fires, like it just kind of like it always starts with a little spark. The opening is like a building of a fire, and then it turns into a dance, and then it ends up with a fire again. When I first heard the recording, I was kind of blown away. And also I saw the video that you did at the Canadian Human Rights Museum in Winnipeg. And I was really proud, one, because it was, you know, my hometown, and also it was in the museum. And I really feel that this music on the choral landscape is important, not just because it's me, because there's other composers right now that I know personally that have other things to say chorally speaking, and they're trained in the choral world.
I know you work within the Western classical art music world, and of course within the framework of the Indigenous ways of knowing as a composer and as a performer, as a curator, as a conductor. What does it mean to you for those two things to coexist? And what are some ways that you think, as you've mentioned already, that you think choral music and collective singing can help us understand that intersectionality?
Well, I mean, I think that choral music is so all-encompassing that I understand the idea of like the worry about appropriation. I understand the worry about like taking something that doesn't belong to you. And I also understand many of the, you know, concerns about even like, if you don't get the context, if you get a piece of music and suddenly in the middle of it says, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, you know, in the text, then of course I would probably be the first person to say, what is this, like, who is this person that wrote this, and what is the context? Why are we chanting hey ya? You know, because I can that you know, but I think that it's only because the fact that the Indigenous perspective across the board has been underrepresented in our culture, then we bring up these questions. This is one of the steps of healing right now, is that feeling of uncomfortableness, the feeling of I'm not sure I'm able to sing this or express this, because I don't think that whether it's the composers or the conductors or the creator of a piece is able to give the context of where this fits into sort of why we're singing this piece. I love the sound of a cappella choral singing. I love the overtones that are, even when you're singing a fifth, like the beginning of the Vision Chant, and that ringing, da, and then that's the opening of this piece, and that's how I know. That's what I know. I don't write Indigenous music, even though I'm Indigenous. I don't write Indigenous music. I don't think there's any such a thing in terms of, except for the Eurocentric ethnomusicologist way of, like, oh, this is field recordings of a powwow drum or a chant or whatever. Heya, the actual word of saying heya, it's a chant. It can be celebrated by other Ishnabeg, the Ojibwe word for two-legged creatures, because we're all two-legged creatures. But we have to be sensitive, and that's why I really feel that's like, I'm not offended by people being feeling uncomfortable, nor are any elders that I know, because they feel that's the right step.
You talk about the heya heya in the middle section of
Mhm.
Vision Chant, and I just wonder if you could describe that for us as it pertains to this particular, in the B section here, how it pertains to this piece, because there is such a dynamic energy that really builds through that section. So what do you want us to know about that?
I think it's the importance of communal singing. For this particular piece, that the meaning of this, it's a communal coming together. The heyas, or there's many like different, like, I only speak for the Cree Ojibwe, the Plains Cree Ojibwe, but there's a different Inuktitut, like Aya, or different ways of sort of communal. Everybody comes together, like for the chorus. So if we want to analyze it that way, or for communal singing, I understand why people are nervous about that, but you're not singing it in a stereotypical way. You're not racial profiling by singing heya. And this conversation we have right now actually is hopefully breaking down some of those barriers that make people nervous. You don't have to be an Indigenous person to sing something like that. But at the same time, we need to learn sort of where that comes from. The choral community in this country we're going to be discovering this in the next little while. Even though this pandemic has been crazy this last year, we're going to come out of this, hopefully, with a more diverse, a more decolonial perspective of choral music, and also more representative of the diversity in this country that we have in the past 100 years, which is important, I believe.
This piece is published by Cypress Choral Music. For details on how to order this music and to check out more great repertoire, be sure to visit cypresschoral.com. The Canadian Chamber Choir Series for Accomplished Choirs is just one of several great collections curated by outstanding Canadian choral conductors, and I encourage you to check that out as well. Huge thanks to Andrew Balfour for joining us today. That's all for now. See you next Wednesday for more great Canadian repertoire.
And when we come out of this crazy pandemic, that we are actually on the right road to make choral music, particularly Canadian choral music, accessible for all and also representative for all.